There are wounds that draw no blood, only etching themselves quietly into the heart. And there are moments that turn a trembling girl into a flame no one can extinguish. This isn't a story about fear. It's about the journey back to oneself, from the shadows of violence to the light of freedom, from being lost to the blaze of love and loyalty. You'll see a heart once crushed now, beating stronger than ever. And sometimes, the moment you believe everything is lost is the very moment it all begins. I burst out of the ballroom like someone wrenched from a nightmare. My heels struck the marble floor like a drumbeat louder even than the pounding of my heart in my throat. When one heel snapped, I staggered against a cold stone pillar. The pain didn't stop me. Pain was an old acquaintance. Pain had a name. Ethan. Madeline. His voice rolled after me, smooth as honey, sharp as a blade. "Don't make a scene here." I kicked off the remaining shoe breath, rasping like knives tearing at my lungs. Around me, laughter went on. Glasses lifted, the golden light shimmering like an oil painting. No one saw the woman running for her life, a shredded heart hidden beneath silk. The corridor opened up, darker, quieter. My hands trembled as I brushed each door, searching for a crack, a passageway, until one opened with a sigh. I slipped inside, closing it gently, praying he hadn't seen. A man's voice drifted through the room, low, precise, not Ethan's. I froze. The air smelled of old wood and cigar smoke power, moving slow as molasses. A long table draped in white, glasses of wine catching the light like threats. I dropped to my knees and crawled beneath it, the thick rug harsh against my bare skin as I curled into myself. I held my breath. My heartbeat thundered in my ears like a war drum. My palm pressed to my mouth to smother the sob clawing up my throat. 5 minutes. I just needed 5 minutes. For him to leave. For me to vanish. A pair of shoes stopped right in front of me. Brown leather, polished, the kind not made for ordinary men. I didn't dare move. My lashes blurred with tears, my sight dimmed. Above me, voices discussed numbers, contracts, shipments. But these shoes stayed still. They had seen me. Inch by inch, I lifted my gaze. He sat at the head of the table, amber light gilding his face like a statue waiting for a name. He seemed carved from silence, from the pause between gusts of wind, his eyes bright beneath a calm surface like gunpowder waiting for a spark. His gaze touched mine, and time cracked open. I braced for the alarm, for someone to drag me up, punish me. Instead, he raised one finger to his lips, a signal for silence. I didn't blink. Then he spoke, not to me, but to the others. "This meeting is over." Chairs scraped footsteps. Retreated doors opened and closed. One by one, the voices dissolved until only the two of us remained and my broken breathing. He rose, circled the table, his presence a velvet-wrapped storm. Then he crouched beside me, eyes locked on mine, as if reading every secret buried under bruised skin and half-swallowed apologies. "Your name?" His voice wasn't exactly gentle nor cruel. It was sharp, clear, like a blade before the cut. "Madeline," I whispered, hating how it shattered out of me like a child's, like praise. "Madeline," he repeated, his tone a verdict. "Who are you running from?" I couldn't answer. My lips moved, but memory choked the sound. His jaw tightened. His eyes stopped at my wrist, where a bruise peeked from under my sleeve. Without asking, his hand reached out, neither soft nor rough, turning my arm to bear it fully. "Who did this?" His voice was steel behind glass. "My husband." A pause heavy as lead. "His name?" I hesitated. "Ethan McAllister." Something shifted, not on his face, in the air. "That name, I know." His breath faltered a beat. "And what was your plan after crawling under my table?" I had no plan. I was just running. My throat clenched. I had believed I'd die tonight. His fingers tightened on my wrist for half a heartbeat, then released. "Stand." I hesitated. He didn't repeat himself. He only looked at me. I rose on trembling legs. My dress was torn at the hem, my hair stuck to my face. I felt like the wreckage of a ship. "Come with me." Why, I asked, too emptied for pleading, too hollow for hope. Because I don't let men like Ethan touch what they don't deserve. I didn't understand, but I followed. Out in the hallway, 2 men in dark suits waited. He gave a single nod. "Take her somewhere safe. Ask no questions." They obeyed without a word. I walked between them, barefoot silent, my heart beating louder than their footsteps. Before the door closed behind me, I looked back. He still stood there, still watching. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He only said one thing. "Breathe, Madeline. Tonight no one can touch you." Then the door shut. The car outside smelled of leather and power. My hands shook. My chest ached. But for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about him. She was like a streak of blood on silk, like a silent note. I watched her step barefoot into the car's shoulders, trembling under the weight of her own breath. She didn't look back, but I knew she felt me. Some people beg to be seen. Some carry their pain like a second skin, visible only to those who've smelled it before. I always had. Her name still lingered on my tongue. Madeline. Sweet, heavy, familiar enough to tilt me off balance. Ethan McAllister. A name I knew. A man who shook hands with devils in suits and wiped blood with scripture. Too small to be terrifying, too protected to be touched. Until tonight. Until she crawled into my world, trembling broken. And mine. I shouldn't care. I don't care. But there's something about her, God help me, something dangerous in a way I can't name. Not to me, to her. Because this world, my world, chews up fragile things like her and spits out the bones. When the door closed, I poured another drink. The crystal chimed softly. The burn of the liquor went down clean. I looked at the spot beneath the table where she had hidden like a hunted creature, and I remembered the way her eyes clung to mine, pleading without words. Most people break in silence. She had broken. But what I saw was someone gathering her pieces. Lucas. I called, no need to raise my voice. He appeared like smoke. The man closest to me, loyal, ruthless. "She'll be safe," he said before I could ask. "Good." "And him?" Lucas asked, hesitating just enough for me to hear it. His eyes searched mine, trying to read an order before it was spoken. "Not yet," I said, my voice slow, like whiskey running down a throat. "You don't want to teach him a lesson?" he asked again. I finished the glass, each swallow deliberate. I want him to believe he still has her. Lucas didn't fully understand. He didn't need to. I turned back to the table, my fingers brushing the cloth where her hand had pressed, as though touching a secret still warm. Her scent lingered, cheap perfume, fear, despair. But beneath it pulsed something else. Defiance. It throbbed under her skin like a second heartbeat. She'd looked at me like a creature cornered that had grown fangs. If I hadn't dismissed the room, if I'd left her there a moment longer, she might have ignited. I hadn't taken her from that place out of pity. I'd taken her because I needed to see what a woman does when everything is stripped from her, when the last breath becomes a choice. I'd seen killers turn lovers, lovers turn to corpses. But this time was different. I opened the file Lucas had left on the desk. Ethan's face stared back at me, shameless like a ghost with a smile. Bribes, blackmail, whispers of violence, never loud enough for the law to hear. Cowardice, familiar, predictable. Except this time he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated her. And I had seen her. That alone was enough to shift everything. The phone buzzed once. A message: "She's resting. No incident." I replied, "No one enters, not even staff." Leaning back in the chair, my fingers tapped the wood. The board had turned, but no one had noticed yet. She was no longer a piece lying still. And me? I wasn't sure what I was anymore. Guardian, predator, or both. What unsettled me most wasn't the bruises on her wrist, nor the fracture in her voice. It was that she had never begged. She whispered, she trembled, but something buried in her silence reminded me of steel. I'd seen fear dressed as obedience, but Madeline wore hers like something beautiful, shattered but sharp. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't drawn to it. Not the way men covet what they shouldn't. No, this was worse. It was like holding a blade to your own throat just to see if it cuts. There would be blood, and if I wasn't careful, it might be mine. The sheets were cold, cold and too smooth, too clean. No scent of home, thank God. No trace of him here, no perfume to mask rot, no footsteps pacing outside, no lock clicking behind me. Only silence thick and heavy, as though the air itself was holding its breath. I sat up slowly. Every muscle ached in an unfamiliar way. Not pain, but like a body unsure how to live without flinching. The room unfolded around me, wide, elegant, but wrong. High ceiling pale light slipping through the curtains, the far-off hush of a hollow world. This wasn't comfort. This was a question. Why was I still alive? I set my feet on the cold floor, wincing as bruises bloomed like secrets under my skin. In the tall mirror across the room, I caught my reflection, hair-tangled lips, cracked eyes like glass drowning in its own storm. But there was something else. His absence. It clung to me like a second skin. The door clicked softly. I spun, heart-hammering, ready to fight, flee, or plead. But it wasn't him. No one at all. A tray of food sat by the wall, silver gleaming, eggs, coffee, fruit. The kind of breakfast reserved for people with choices. The kind of morning I'd never been offered. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked slowly barefoot, fingers skimming polished wood velvet drapes, locked drawers. This wasn't a room. This was a waiting room, gilded in gold. Not a prison, not yet. No bars, only invisible lines drawn in silence. And somewhere behind one of these walls, he was watching. I could feel it. I found the window. Outside, a perfect garden clipped and controlled. No neighbors, no city noise, only a high stone wall whispering, "No one comes in, no one leaves." And I whispered to the glass, "Where am I?" "You're safe." His voice behind me, low measured. I turned slowly. He leaned against the doorframe, black suit, no tie. The kind of man who doesn't need to raise his voice to make a room bow. Eyes like a winter storm, ruthless but fathomless. "I don't feel safe," I breathed. "Because you're used to danger wearing a smile." I swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" His head tilted as though I'd asked the wrong question. "Nothing. You walked into my world. I'm giving you a place to land." "I didn't try to," I whispered. "I know. I didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't gentle. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't flirting. He didn't look at me like he owned me. He just looked at me like a riddle written in scars and silence. And I hated that I wanted him to read me. "You could have thrown me out. I don't return prey to the hunter." The words made me shake. Dangerous. My knees nearly gave way. Not from fear, from the weight of being believed, for the first time. "I'm not prey," I said though. My voice still trembled. He stepped into the room slowly, each move deliberate, not threatening, not exactly, but every nerve in me pulled taut. "No," he said, voice lower now. "You're something else entirely. You just haven't remembered yet." I felt the line we were drawing between us, every breath like silk across skin. I turned my face away before it could swallow me. "I can't stay here. You can, for now, when the shaking stops, we'll talk." I lifted my eyes to his. "I don't need your protection." He didn't move a step, but the room seemed to dim when his answer came. "Then why are you still here?" I had no answer, at least none I dared speak. Instead, my eyes went to the untouched tray, and I asked, "Is it poisoned?" The corner of his mouth lifted, a smile that wasn't a smile. "If I wanted you dead, Madeline, I wouldn't waste eggs on you." I almost laughed. Almost. He turned, pausing at the doorframe. "Eat, walk, sleep, smash something if you need to. You're not here to be a silent shadow." Then he was gone, and I stood there barefoot in a borrowed cage, my chest still burning from that fleeting curl of his mouth, and a strange hunger tightening my throat. She didn't eat, not a bite. The tray went out as it came in untouched, and I couldn't decide whether to be annoyed or impressed. Most people would cling to any scrap of comfort like the starving, but her fasting was deliberate, as though refusing a meal was a way of taking back a sliver of control. Maybe it was. I watched her on the security screen. She paced the room barefoot as though she meant to set it alight from within. Her fingers skimmed the walls, the bookshelves, the glossy surfaces, not searching, but reclaiming the space. I let her, and she didn't cry. That was what haunted me. Not once. Not at the mirror seeing the bruises, not touching the split on her lip, not at the window whispering into the glass as though it might answer back. She didn't know the glass was soundproof, but I still heard her. The lights flicked on as I entered the training room, cold white light pouring over steel and concrete. No velvet, no ornament, just the smell of iron sweat and bodies at their edge. I waited 10 minutes, 15, then the door opened. She stood on the threshold, arms crossed, chin lifted like a dare. She'd changed clothes, black tank, loose trousers, hair tied back, still barefoot, still wild-eyed, still beautiful in a way that unsettled me. "You told me to smash something," she said softly like a breath. I nodded, tossing my towel aside. "First smash yourself." She gave a dry laugh. "Done that already." I didn't laugh. I didn't soften. I moved closer each step, pulling the invisible thread between us, taut. "Good. Then you know the price." Her gaze flicked over the gloves, the pads, the steel bars hanging on the wall like art. Then back to me. "What are you actually giving me, Daniel?" "Freedom. But it doesn't come from silence or surrender." "And what do you get?" The question hung there heavy and bare as unnamed intimacy. She hadn't learned my name because I'd told her. She'd pieced it together. Snatches of interrupted phone calls, Lucas murmuring in the hall, rain-blurred notes on the gym desk. Daniel had slipped into her ear like a landmark, a handhold in the maze of strangers. And when she spoke it aloud for the first time, her voice hoarse, I understood it wasn't a question. It was a challenge. "I get to see what you'll become." She swallowed, her throat moving. "And if I fail, then you die, and I clean the floor." Her mouth twitched, part sneer, part fury. "Fair enough." I stepped into the middle of the mat, turned back. "Come here." She hesitated. One step, another. Then she was in front of me, her heart hammering loud enough I could almost hear it. "Hit me." She blinked. I didn't repeat myself. The first punch was clumsy, slow, weak. I caught her wrist midair, holding it a fraction longer than necessary. The touch made her flinch, not from fear, but from memory. Again. She struck harder. I blocked. Again. Each failed blow lit something raw in her. Her breath came ragged. Her cheeks flushed. Anger began to take shape. "You're still holding back," I murmured. "I'm not. You are. You're still trying to survive. It's not enough." She growled. Actually growled. And swung wildly. I sidestepped. Her balance faltered. She pitched forward. My arm slipped around her waist, catching her. Her body pressed to mine for the space of a heartbeat. She didn't pull away. She looked up, lips parted, her breath searing my neck. The air changed color, thickened, slowed. Her fingers gripped my shirt before she realized it. I didn't move, neither did she. Then very quietly she asked, "Have you ever been owned?" I said nothing. The truest answer. She stepped back, her breath shaking. But something had shifted. Dangerous, electric, real. Again she said, and this time she didn't miss. My knuckles throbbed, skin split, blood smearing in the thin lines. But I didn't stop. Even with breath splintering, balance slipping, fire burning up my arms. And he didn't allow me to stop. Daniel stood there unnervingly still, as though every movement of mine was an unspoken test. Failure wasn't an option. It was a sentence. I failed beautifully, and still I craved his eyes on me. Each time he said, "Again," I obeyed, not from command, but because something in me needed to keep breaking open, to dig out whatever was buried under the girl who used to flinch at a man's raised voice. My body screamed, but I had never felt so alive. Then he stepped forward, catching my wrist, mid-punch, twisting, pinning. In an instant, I was beneath him, back to the mat, chest, heaving limbs held effortlessly in place. His body was rigid, almost not touching, but strength filled every space between us. That distance sent my blood into chaos. "Your balance is terrible," he whispered, his breath grazing my ear. "Then teach me," I murmured. His eyes caught mine, sharp, unreadable, brimming with restraint. He didn't move, didn't blink, just looked at me as though deciding what I was made of. She followed me without hesitation, barefoot, bruised, as though her pain had become my own. Perhaps it had. Perhaps every cut she'd once hidden, every breath she'd swallowed under someone else's control, now found an echo in my steps. I could hear her behind me, silent but present, like the low murmur of something that refuses to die. The weapons room opened with the sound of steel and shadow. Inside, the walls were lined with the shapes of violence, knives, guns, ropes. Relics from a life I'd abandoned without ever really leaving. She stood at the center, eyes catching the glint of metal, like a child staring into the mouth of a storm. "You're not here to learn how to kill," I said. "No," she answered. "I'm here to learn how not to be a victim." I turned slowly, taking in her stance, the line of her back, the way she didn't flinch at the cold. Fear doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. She looked straight at me, and in that gaze was something reshaping me. It wasn't a line meant to be touched, but it touched anyway, stripped of poetry. Only need, only hunger wrapped in rage. I stepped closer, picking up a small curved knife perfect for a hand that had learned not to hesitate. I held it out. She didn't look at the blade. She looked at me. If I take this, I'll become her. Her, the new version of me, the one who survives. I didn't answer. There were no words, only action. I set the knife gently in her hand. Her fingers curled around it like memory, like instinct. Again I murmured, "Don't aim to win, aim to survive." Her breath caught. "I already have." I watched her move, at first slow, cautious, then bolder, slashing at the empty air, as though it had once pinned her down. Her hair clung to her skin, sweat purled along her collarbone. She was fury wrapped in grace, a storm learning to whisper. I stepped behind her close enough to feel the heat of her frustration vibrating under control. My hand slid to her arm, guiding the movement. Not a touch to claim, but to shape. Here I whispered at the nape of her neck. "Your wrist is too rigid. Let it flow like breath, like blood." She didn't pull away. "You don't touch like the others." I held her steady. "And you don't look at me like other women do." She stilled. "Why?" "Because I don't want what you're not ready to give." Her heartbeat jumped. I could feel it here. It wanted to swallow it with my mouth, with something rough and nameless. But I didn't. I stepped back. She moved sharper now, cleaner. I watched the rhythm of her body shift from survival towards something nearer to power. It stirred in me something deeper than desire. Respect, awe, a dangerous ache. When she stopped, her chest rose like a tide. She turned to me. He never let me fight back. I didn't blink, then fight me. What? Now? Attack me as you'd attack him. She hesitated long enough to remember. Then she lunged. Not neat, not pretty, wild, messy, angry. She screamed with her soul, not her voice. I blocked every strike with calculated restraint, not hurting her, not letting her land a blow, but letting her feel resistance, the edge of what she could become. When she crumpled to her knees, breath-shattered hair plastered to her skin, she lifted her face, and there was no fear in her eyes. I knelt in front of her slow. "I don't need to protect you," I said. "I need to remind you." "So, what am I asked?" He let his knuckles trace the line of my jaw, once lightly. A weapon learning how to want. I didn't flinch. He didn't breathe. My body trembled not from exhaustion, but from something deeper, waking beneath my skin. Sweet, dark, terrifying. I should have felt broken. I should have cried. But I only looked at him. Daniel, a man carved from silence and shadow. And I wanted to swallow that stillness in his eyes, to taste the control he wore like a second soul. He called me a weapon. No one had ever seen me that way. They'd only seen a girl to ruin or a girl to save. But he didn't try to heal me. He gave me the blade. I rose slowly. The air between us thickened enough to drown in. The place where his fingers had brushed my jaw burned hotter than any bruise I'd ever carried. I didn't shake. Not in front of him. Not anymore. I stepped past him toward the wall where the knives gleamed like promises. My reflection flashed in the steel. Bare feet, blood-stained skin, a stranger I barely recognized. The girl who used to whisper apologies into silence was gone, buried beneath bruises, sweat rage, and something he hadn't yet named. I turned back. "You said I'm learning how to want. What if I already do?" His gaze darkened, but he didn't move. "Then you have to learn how to survive it." There was no gentleness in his voice, only restraint. Tight, dangerous. I stepped closer. Not to tempt, not to test, but to see if I could. His breath hitched, just slightly, but I heard it. "Why won't you touch me?" I asked, my voice low even. "Because you're not ready for what I'll do if I do." My heart clenched, not from fear but recognition. I had known touches that didn't ask, didn't hesitate. And now, standing before this man, this legend, who held his hunger behind his teeth like a secret made of knives, I thought, and if I want that. He took one step closer, near enough that his heat crawled across my skin. His eyes pinned me in place. His voice softened, dangerous, aching. "Wanting isn't needing, Madeline. Don't mistake fire for the burn." I whispered, my voice cracked but my eyes unflinching. "I just don't know what to do when it doesn't hurt." He looked at me as if he could tear through every layer of me with breath alone. Then slowly, like a warning, he lifted a hand and tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear. "It still hurts," he murmured, "just differently." My eyes fluttered shut, not from fear but from too much too fast. The silence between us had teeth. It clawed at the skin, wanting to bite deeper. "I hate him," I whispered. "I know. I want to watch him fall apart the way he made me." "You will." "I want him to beg. He won't get the chance." I opened my eyes. "You'll help me." His answer was a breath against my skin. "I already am." We stood there breathing, not touching, but closer than flesh. The echoes of violence settled into something else. Sharper, quieter, not love, not yet, but the kind of pain that lives in the space before it finds a name. And in that moment, I understood something I never had before. He was my undoing. And I was beginning to like it. She didn't move when I touched her, didn't flinch, didn't retreat. It should have made it easier to walk away. It didn't. That stillness wasn't surrender. It was balance, standing on the blade's edge, waiting for blood to prove she was still alive. I could see the change in her. Violence no longer clung to her skin like memory. It pulsed through her veins. She was becoming something else, and she didn't even know it. The air stretched between us, tight as wire, ready to snap. Her breath skimmed my neck, too close, too real. I should have moved, but I didn't. "I should go," I said. "Then go," she answered. But I stayed, because she didn't beg and I didn't look away. Between us burned a flame that hadn't yet risen, but the smoke was already spreading. "You don't understand what this is." "Maybe I do. That's why I'm still here." Her words stopped me cold. She wasn't lost. She was choosing me. The pain in her matched the darkness in me, mirrored it. But I couldn't give her what she wanted. There was no peace inside me, only darkness wearing the mask of control. And I knew as surely as breath stories like this only ever end one way. If he grabs your wrist, what will you do? Break his fingers. If he tries to choke you, stab his eyes or bite. And if he touches you where you don't want him to. Yet I opened my eyes, turned to him, my voice steady. "I'll kill him." He smiled, just for a moment, but it was real, because he knew I meant it. "Good," he said, "but sometimes power lies in not needing to prove it." I tilted my head. That sounds like something a man says when he's afraid of what a woman can do. He leaned closer, his voice sharpened to glass. "No, that's what a man says when he's seen it happen. And lived." I blinked. He added barely. A laugh slipped from me. Low, quiet, unexpected. And it struck something in his chest neither of us had a name for. In that moment, he knew I would be the one thing he could never control. And he was willing to let it be that way. The first drop of rain hit the window pane as I closed the door behind me. I wasn't sure why I needed to breathe. Maybe because he had already taken the air from my lungs and left none behind. The hallway was still, the light dim, the darkness more honest than any lamp. My feet moved on instinct, not memory. I wasn't running away. I just couldn't breathe, with his voice still echoing somewhere inside my ribs. Every inch of my skin trembled. His breath hadn't touched me, but I could feel where it almost had. The words he'd left between my thighs, tender and brutal all at once, clung to me. I hated myself for remembering their shape days later. I didn't want to, not again, not like this. But I couldn't stop replaying the way his eyes locked on mine when I said I would kill to protect myself. I had told the truth. God help me, I had. The room he'd given me, refuge or prison, I still couldn't tell. I sat on the edge of the bed, afraid the ground would disappear if I moved too fast. My hands trembled. I looked at them. They had held a knife. They had made fists. They had touched him, enough to leave a mark, enough to know I could. But none of it made me feel powerful. I felt ruined. And strangely, I wanted him to see me like that. I stood, peeled off the sweat-damp tank top, the thin trousers that clung to my legs. The fabric fell to the floor like skin I no longer needed. I walked to the mirror, bare, unhidden. My body told the story of a woman who had never been protected. Faint scars, fading bruises, lips that no longer apologized for existing. I looked straight at my reflection. This time, I didn't look away. A knock at the door. I didn't answer. The door opened a crack. I stood still, unguarded. He froze in the doorway, eyes dark, jaw tight, as if my nakedness were a weapon he hadn't yet learned how to defend against. "You left your knife in the training room," he said quietly. I didn't move. "Then leave it. He didn't leave. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was heat breath, the slow uncoiling of restraint. His gaze dragged across me, heavy, unwilling, furious, with the pull between us. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "Then tell me to go." I couldn't. He stepped inside, every motion a question, every pause a warning. He set the knife on the table but kept his hand on it. His chest rose and fell like a man trying not to drown. "Say it," he murmured. "Say what? That you want me?" I closed my eyes. The only way to keep from breaking? "I don't want you." He didn't move. "I need you." His breath hitched, and I hated him for hearing the truth in it. He crossed the space between us without a sound. His hand lifted, stopping just at my throat, not touching. Waiting for permission. I opened my eyes, nodded. He exhaled and kissed me. My lips opened under his like confession. No fear, no hesitation, only surrender, chosen deliberate, but never naive. I kissed him back as a declaration, pulling him closer until the line between control and collapse melted into heat, into skin, into breath. He kissed deeper, slower, as if trying to break time in half. His teeth caught my lip, not cruelly, just to remind me he was not gentle, not safe. But in that moment, he was mine. I gasped against his neck. "You once said I wasn't ready." I did. His hands tightened at my hips. "You weren't. Now you're dangerous." I smiled. "Slow, ruinous. So are you." He stepped back, needing distance to breathe. I stood before him, bare in body and soul. A woman risen from ash, daring the fire to burn her again. "You don't understand what this means," he said. "I do. It means I'm not afraid anymore." He raked a hand through his hair, jaw locked. He was made for vengeance, and I was becoming something dangerously close to salvation. "Madeline." I moved toward him without hesitation. "Don't speak to me like I'm fragile." "You're not," he said, voice steel. "You're fire, but fire destroys. And maybe I want to burn." He stepped closer slowly. His fingers lifted my chin, his eyes caught mine. "Then understand this," he said, each word a blade. "This isn't love. What you feel is survival, wearing the skin of desire. Danger woven with want. You're not allowed to fall for me." My breath shook, but my eyes didn't waver. Too late. He looked at me for a long time, merciless, unreadable. Then he leaned in, brushed his lips against my cheek once. "Don't say I didn't warn you." He left, and I stood there, bare, burning, unforgettable. The room held his absence like an open wound that refused to close. And I understood he hadn't kissed me to claim me. He'd kissed me to remind me that desire doesn't mean belonging. That even with his hands on my skin, I was still my own. He had never taken, he had given. He had always let me choose. I wrapped the sheet around myself, slow, deliberate, like armor. The woman in the mirror didn't shake. Her shoulders stayed straight. Her lips didn't ask for mercy. I had begged enough in the lives I'd already lived. Begged for mercy, for silence, for someone to believe that I existed. Now there was only one thing I wanted: revenge. But not the kind that screams in the dark. Not chaos, not a bullet with no name. I wanted him to feel it. Ethan. I wanted him to look straight into my eyes while I stripped everything from him. His power, his pride, his fear. I wanted him to see the woman he'd tried to destroy, and to realize he was the one who'd placed the match in the hand of his own ruin. Daniel had taught me how to fight. But this performance, every step, every breath, would be choreographed by me. I left the room barefoot. The corridor was cold as glass, slicing through my soles, but somehow the pain felt familiar. The storm had already begun outside. The sky cracked open with thunder pulsing through me like a second heartbeat. The house seemed to listen, a living thing holding its breath. Down in the kitchen, Lucas stood with his arms folded, eyes sharp as blades. He didn't flinch when he saw me wrapped in only a sheet. No questions, no pity. Up early, he said simply. I met his gaze. "I need a car." He raised a brow. "Does Daniel know?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Silence was its own permission. 10 minutes later, I was dressed in black. Fitted jeans, leather jacket, hair tied back. The mirror behind me showed a stranger unasking, unbeholden. The gun Daniel had given me weeks ago, pressed cold against my ribs, as familiar as a heartbeat. I opened the door. The storm kissed my face like a warning. Rain lashed down heavy and relentless, unsure if it meant to cleanse or to wound. I didn't care. I walked into it because pain no longer frightened me. And neither did he. Ethan would see me one last time, but not as the girl he'd married, as the woman he'd never imagined. When I stepped into the training room and found it empty, I understood immediately. The silence wasn't accidental. It had been arranged deliberate, like a wound placed carefully where it would be noticed. No echo of breath, no scent of sweat, only absence and the storm drumming on the windows in a language only I understood. I didn't panic, I didn't curse. I stood there staring at the floor where she had bled and rebuilt herself, and I knew exactly where she'd gone. To him. I should have stopped her. I should have locked every door, destroyed her resolve before it cooled into vengeance. But I hadn't, because some part of me wanted this. I wanted him to see her. I wanted Ethan to look into the face of the woman he once thought belonged to him and realize he had created the architect of his own collapse. But I also knew men like him turn monstrous when cornered. Cowards become their worst selves when the leash slips from their hand. She, rain-soaked, fearless storm that she was walking back into the cage that had once held her. I called Lucas, my voice cold as velvet-sheathed steel. How long? 20 minutes. She driving. Yeah, I'm following. Hanging back. I'll handle it. I ended the call before he could ask if I was sure. I wasn't sure of anything except this. If he laid a hand on her, if that bastard so much as breathed in her direction, I would make him beg for mercy in a language his soul didn't understand. The rain thickened as I drove. My suit clung to my skin, slick with sweat and storm water, but I didn't feel discomfort. My hands gripped the steering wheel, as if I could crush the distance between us into dust. Every mile between us was a thread pulled tighter, tighter. I could feel her fury flowing through the city like a beacon, fearless, unstoppable. She didn't need saving, but God help anyone who tried to stop her. I didn't know what I would say when I saw her. Apologies felt clumsy in my mouth. Promises worse. All I could offer was truth. I wasn't her rescuer. I was only the man who'd shown her the way. Part of me prayed I wouldn't be too late. Not because I feared she'd fail. I didn't. But because I wasn't sure I could bear seeing her become someone who never looked back. Not even for me. Rain hammered the windshield like a war drum, relentless, counting down. I didn't flinch. I didn't slow. The road stretched ahead, black and slick, like a vein pulsing toward the heart of something inevitable. I drove straight to the house I once called home, the place that had drained my voice and taught me to survive instead of live. I parked, turned off the engine. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the breath before the scream. His car was there. Of course it was. Ethan rarely left the walls he'd built around himself. He clung to power like a disease unwilling to die. I stepped out. The rain washed my face. Baptism or poison, I couldn't tell. My footsteps struck the wet ground with purpose. No hesitation. I didn't knock. I used the key. It slid into the lock with the ease of old habit. The door creaked, a sound that had once frozen my blood. Now it steadied my heart. Inside the hallway was exactly as I remembered, chandeliers glinting perfume and power, thick as decay. Then his voice, Madeline. Once that name had turned me to stone, now I smiled. He stepped out from his office, tie, loosened sleeves, rolled, pretending it normal. But I saw it. The tension beneath the pose, the flicker of fear. I stood there drenched the storm-made flesh. "What are you doing here?" he barked. I said nothing, only stepped forward. He took a step back, and my heart thrilled at it. "You think you can walk out and come back like nothing happened?" I slipped off my jacket, let it fall to the floor. His eyes caught the gun at my hip. "Good. Say it," he snarled. I tilted my head. "Have you ever wondered what fear feels like, Ethan?" He laughed, hollow, brittle. "I don't fear you. You should be afraid." He swung at me. I was faster. His hand caught my wrist. That old claim of ownership. I twisted, drove my elbow into his ribs. He staggered, gasping. "You hit me." His voice cracked. The sound of a man discovering he could bleed. I hit him again. He lunged. I kicked. He fell. I pinned him, my knee to his chest. One hand at his throat, the other around the handle of Daniel's knife. I didn't press the blade to his skin. I didn't need to. The terror in his eyes was enough. "You broke me," I whispered, "but you never finished the job." He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. I stood, calm. The storm still roared behind me. He lay on the floor, gasping like a man just learning what losing feels like. I looked down at him once more. "I don't belong to you anymore. Then I left. By the time I reached the car, the rain had softened. No longer fury, just sorrow, as if the sky itself was mourning something buried. I parked a little way down the road, engine off, glass fogging with breath. I didn't move. I needed to feel it first. The trace she'd left behind, the scent of anger lingering like smoke after fire. She had been there. I knew it in my bones. The darkness around the house, holding its breath, listening for the sound of her footsteps fading into the storm. I got out of the car slowly, as if threads of night clung to each step. The front door hung ajar, wavering in the storm wind, like a last whisper left behind. I pushed it, and the hinges groaned. The familiar sound of a door that no longer meant to keep anyone in or hold anyone out. Inside, silence spread, not peaceful, hollow, emptied of soul. Her traces were there, wet footprints blooming across the floor, a jacket thrown aside, a faint red smear drawn out like testimony. Not quite blood. A marker, the kind of evidence only men like me recognize. Men who know the brutality sometimes required to walk away whole. And then I saw him, Ethan, on the floor, shirt, crumpled face, cracked with fury, eyes wild like a man who has brushed a god and discovered the god has fangs. He lifted his head, voice shaking. "You? Did she bring you?" I didn't answer. "You think she's yours? One day she'll turn on you the way she turned on me." I walked toward him, one slow step at a time. I wanted him to feel the weight of narrowing distance. I wanted him to hear the clock counting down. "She doesn't need me," I said low and even. "She came to end this," and she did. He laughed, hollow, salted with the taste of blood. "She's a performance. Broken goods playing justice." I knelt, brought my face level with his, and let my silence bury him deeper than words. "She isn't pretending," I said, cold as ice. "She only stopped pretending she belonged to you." He swallowed, fear rising off him. Rancid, pitiful. I leaned closer, let my breath touch his. "Be grateful it was her hand, and not mine." "I should have killed you," he growled. "You tried," I said, "through her. How did that work out?" He twitched, reaching for something. I let him, to watch the last cinders of pride. Then my hand closed on his throat, tight, controlled, just enough to show him how thin the border is between breath and none. "You'll lie still, you'll disappear. If not, I'll finish what she began." I released him. He dropped, gulping air, a man reborn into humiliation. I stood, straightened my cuffs, and turned toward the door. And she was there. Madeline, under the rain hair soaked and tangled shoulders, carrying the weather lips wet but steady. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She only looked at me as if she'd known I would come, as if for the first time she wasn't alone in the storm. I stepped out to her, careful not to save, only to stand beside, because this fire was hers, and I was tired of pretending I didn't want to burn with it. She didn't ask what I had done. She didn't need to. She took in my locked jaw the way my breath came heavier. She knew. She always knew. "I don't need you," she said, voice sure as steel. "I know. I'd have done it without you. I know." Her fingers flexed at her side, still shaking with the anger she'd poured into him. Not satisfaction, not regret. Something deeper, quieter. As though she'd touched the edge of herself and found she no longer feared the dark. "You're bleeding," I said. She looked at her hand, split knuckles, skin opening red. The pain hadn't reached her yet. She'd hit harder than she had to. "Good," she smiled. I took her hand, turned it, let my gaze settle on the broken skin. Not gentle, reverent, as if the wound were a holy proof. "You hit him." "Hard." She gave a small, dry laugh. "Not hard enough." The air thickened, drew long. I held her hand like a relic, a warning, something I wanted and dared not own. "He's nothing," she whispered, "but I carried him for years." "Not anymore," she said. I looked at her, rain tracking her face, my voice low. "You look like a war." Her chin lifted. "Good." I leaned in, my breath meeting her heartbeat. "You always were." In that moment, the world held its breath. "Do you want me?" she asked. Rain and blood soaked our hands like a pact. I nodded. "I want 100 things I can't have." "Yes, I want you." The truth tore something open in me. Not soft, not sweet, but true. "Then take me," she whispered. I looked at her the way a man looks at a fire he knows will consume him, and I stepped forward. But instead of claiming, I lifted her hand and kissed the wound. A quiet promise. Then I let go. "I won't take what you just fought to reclaim." I should have stayed. God, I wanted to. Her blood warmed my hand bright and alive. She looked at me like a man who could be wanted without owning. It nearly killed me. But I didn't stay because I knew what came next. Not safety, not gentleness. A line that once crossed would never uncross. And she deserved the choice. I watched her disappear into her car, the door-closing warmth fogging the glass. I stood in the rain-heart drumming until the car slipped from sight. Inside, I washed my hands, watched the water lift the red away like a right, wondered which part of me she had taken. Not stolen, offered. Lucas found me later. She's safe, he said. Asleep. She didn't call anyone. She didn't call you. I folded that cut away where no one could see. She's finished, I said. Yeah, and gone. Yeah. Lucas cleared his throat. She'll leave for good. I nodded. You going to stop her? I looked at him. Are you... He hesitated. I'd burn the world for a woman like that. I smiled thin. That's why you shouldn't... He left. I sat alone in the dark glass and have had her name on my mouth like a bruise that wouldn't fade. I knew she would go in the morning. No tears, no promises, only the click of heels across the floor and everything we didn't say. She had never been mine, but she was the only thing I had ever wanted to keep. I didn't follow, because love isn't a leash, and I have already broken too many beautiful things. I left no goodbye. I didn't need to. The silence I left behind said it for me, thank you. Don't look for me. And if there's still love, let me go before I need you more than myself. Morning came, sky gray, but clear, as if the world had exhaled. I walked barefoot through the house, stone cool under my skin, every corner still steeped in him. Whiskey leather, rain regret. I paused at the study, shut my eyes for a heartbeat longer than necessary, then opened them and kept walking, not shattered, only remembering what it felt like to be wanted without being owned. The sky widened, promising nothing. I stepped into the quiet with no plan, no destination, only freedom. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a breath, the first after surfacing from deep water. I'd thought leaving him would hurt. It didn't. It was hunger, slow growing under the ribs down in the marrow. I carry him in memory, the way he looked at me as if I were fire. He was never frightening. The way he touched, never without reason. The way he gave me back my own name and asked for nothing in return. But he was never mine, and I could not stay, not when the world outside was waiting, not when I was finally ready to face it without trembling. I didn't cry until I sat in the car, not from sadness, not from doubt, but because the part of me that once believed I couldn't live without him had finally died. And saying goodbye to that part I thought deserved a moment of softness, a small ending. I didn't turn on the radio. I drove in silence, steady hands pressed lips, eyes wide open. The road ahead didn't promise safety, but it was mine. And this time I wasn't running. I was choosing. I knew she was gone before I opened my eyes. The house was too still, not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the silence that follows when something has been taken. I didn't rush. I didn't call her name. That was never our language. She owed me nothing. Places like this are made for ghosts, and I have never feared being haunted. Her scent lingered in the hallway. Salt rain, and a warmth I couldn't name. My hand brushed the doorway where she had once leaned, half wanting to leave, half unable. I looked at the space where she had stood, and for a moment, I hated the air for letting her slip away. She hadn't asked me to stop her. She trusted I wouldn't. And that was its own kind of love. A sharp-edged language that can't be held without bleeding. I made coffee as though it still meant something. Black slow. The way she'd begun to drink it after those mornings when we sat in silence untouched. She would sit by the window legs folded, watching the world as if waiting for it to speak first. I never interrupted then. I don't now. Lucas came in without a word. He stood there watching me stir a cup for someone who would never drink it. His silence weighed heavier than the storm outside. She's gone, he said at last. I know. She left no note. She didn't need to. You let her go. I looked up, voice steady. She was never mine. Lucas nodded once, then left, like a man who understands that some things sacred can't be argued with. I stayed for hours in her silence, remembered how her breath hitched when I kissed her wound instead of her mouth, remembered her eyes unwavering when I told her the truth she didn't want to hear, remembered how she spilled the blood of her past across my floor and never asked me to clean it. She entered my world like a fracture, quiet and devastating. And I let her go, not because I didn't want her. Wanting was never the problem. The problem was being afraid I needed her. Now I must learn to live with the echo of her footsteps fading down a corridor that no longer leads to me. 3 years is long enough to become someone else, or at least to stop being the girl who once ran barefoot across marble floors, heart beating to another man's anger. I no longer wake choking on air. I no longer bow to mirrors. My silence is no longer surrender. It is sovereignty, every scar a toll for each breath I own. The city moves differently beneath my eyes now. I walk through it without glancing back, without calculating exits. People say my name without pity now, sometimes with respect, sometimes with fear. The good kind of fear, the kind that keeps certain men from trying again. I built from ashes a training room. The women who come to me aren't broken things. They are survivors wanting to learn how to fight like it means living. I train them the way he trained me. Except when the blood falls, I meet their eyes. I hold space for their rage. I don't tell them to calm down. I tell them to hit higher. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my mind. Daniel, rough as gravel under velvet. The way he lowered it, trying to hide his concern. He thought I didn't see, but I did. I saw everything, even the part of him locked behind that unbreakable calm. I haven't seen him since the day I left. I haven't looked for him either. He made it clear his world wasn't built for tenderness. And I was never tender. I just hadn't realized it yet. But today something shifts. I step into a restaurant. No plan, just instinct. The kind of place built for people like him, quiet, polished, private. I tell myself I'm here for the food, for the calm, for the power of sitting in a room I once feared. And then I see him. He doesn't turn immediately. He sits in the far corner as always. A glass of wine in hand, dark suit cut like a warning, not a comfort. 3 years hadn't softened him. If anything, they'd sharpened him, carved danger into definition. He looks like the final form of control, precise, composed, lethal. And he's looking at me, through the reflection of his glass. Of course he knows I'm here. I walk toward him, not slowly, not like before. This time my steps are steady. This time I don't tremble. This time I am the fire. My footsteps echoed, firm, deliberate, each one a whisper. I don't need you. I never did. But I want to know, do you still bleed the way I remember? He didn't stand. He only watched, measuring, waiting. I reached the table, slid into the chair across from him, and held his gaze as if it owed me something. My voice didn't shake. Now I choose silence. I choose you. Still no reply. Not because I was lost, not because I needed saving, but because now I understood wanting isn't the same as withering. Wanting is being alive. The silence stretched so long, I thought it might shatter. He set his glass down slowly, then leaned forward, his voice low. Velvet hiding the edge of danger. And what will you do? He asked if I say. Yes. I smiled. Then we'll burn it all again. But this time, together. She entered as if the room had been built to receive her. Gone was the hesitation, the tension of someone waiting to collide. She moved like a storm that had learned how to master its own silence. I felt her before I saw her. The shift in the air, the breath I forgot to take. And when I turned, she was already halfway to me. The click of her heels was a countdown. Her mouth set her eyes steady, a promise in motion. I tightened my grip around the glass. 3 years. And somehow, peace had made her more dangerous than pain ever did. She sat without asking. Of course she did. The woman before me no longer waited for permission. She was forged steel, sharp edges dressed in elegance. But her eyes, the same fire. The same question I had spent 3 years running from. Now I didn't want to run. Her voice cut through the space between us like a blade wrapped in silk. Now I choose you. I didn't blink. I choose you. The words didn't fall. They struck. Heavy. Certain. They hurt not because they were wrong, but because I wasn't sure I deserved to hear them. She leaned in, slow, fearless, unshaken. Not because I need you to save me, she said, but because I know who I am, and I still want you. My throat tightened. I stayed silent. Not for lack of words, but because in front of me sat a version of her I never thought I'd see again. No longer broken, no longer pieced together. Whole, blazing, unstoppable, and somehow still mine. Her smile tilted. Dangerous, exquisite, mercilessly beautiful. So, tell me, Daniel. She whispered, what will you do if I say, I want everything? I set the glass down, each motion, deliberate, the kind of slowness that comes before surrender. Then I met her gaze, A man stepping willingly off the edge, eyes open. My voice was rough, low, absolute. "I'll burn with you," she exhaled, soft like release. And just like that, the world narrowed until only she remained. Because love had never been my language. But loyalty, that was sacred. And I would follow her into the fire without question until the end.